The wind cut across my face like a blade the moment the front door slammed behind me. Christmas Eve should have smelled like pine needles and cinnamon, but all I could taste was the metallic sting of winter as I stumbled down the frozen marble steps with my single suitcase banging against my shin. Behind me, the lights of my parents' mansion glowed warm and golden, a scene from a postcard. If you didn't know they'd just thrown their eldest daughter out like trash they no longer wanted. My little sister Chloe leaned against the doorframe in her red velvet dress, arms folded, lips curled in a smirk that could slice skin. "Let's see you survive now," she purred, voice dripping with amusement. "Merry Christmas, sis." The door shut before I could even draw breath to answer. Snow crunched under my boots as I reached the sidewalk, the cold sinking through my coat like it was nothing more than thin paper. My fingers throbbed, my lungs burned, my dignity cracked in the freezing air. Every breath came out as a tremor. I tried to swallow the humiliation, but it sat thick in my throat, refusing to go down. I kept walking because stopping meant collapsing, and collapsing meant breaking apart on the pavement where no one would ever bother to pick up the pieces. And then, just as my knees threatened to buckle, I saw her, a woman curled on a bus bench beneath a flickering street lamp, barefoot, trembling, skin blued by the cold. Her hair hung in silver strands across her face. She looked so fragile I thought the wind might blow her apart. Something inside me shifted, overriding everything. Fear, fury, grief. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think. I stepped forward, pulled off my winter boots, and placed them gently onto her frostbitten feet. She looked up at me with eyes like broken glass catching the light. "Kindness like yours," she whispered, "is rarer than diamonds." 2 hours later, 30 black Porsches rolled into our neighborhood in perfect formation, engines humming like a quiet threat. The same woman stepped out of the middle car, no longer frail, no longer freezing. She was immaculate, powerful, impossible. And her eyes held mine as she spoke a single sentence that changed everything. I should have run, but I stayed. Hours before that moment. Before the boots, before the Porsches, before the woman who would unravel every truth I'd ever believed. I'd been sitting in my tiny office cubicle at Sullivan & Raines, staring at an email I'd pretended for 10 full minutes wasn't real. "Dear Ms. Alden, due to restructuring." Restructuring. The corporate euphemism for, "You're done here, good luck surviving the wreckage." I closed my laptop with numb fingers, packed the dying plant that had survived 3 layoffs already, and walked to my 12-year-old car in a fog so thick it felt like cotton stuffed inside my skull. 6 years at the firm, 6 years of clawing for recognition that never came. And now I was driving home to parents who hadn't called me in months, and a sister who kept going viral for unboxing luxury handbags she didn't pay for. Traffic crawled, raindrops froze on my windshield. I kept rehearsing what I'd say when I arrived. "I just need a few days. I'm between jobs. I'm okay." But all of it tasted like failure. When I finally turned onto our street in River's Edge, the mansion glowed like a holiday catalog fantasy. Tall windows dripping with warm light. A massive tree twinkling through the foyer glass. Caterers unloading silver trays. And inside, my family. My mother spotted me first. Margaret Alden, wrapped in pearls and precision, adjusting the orchids lining the hallway as though they were props on a stage. My father, crisp navy blazer, gold cufflinks, swirling a glass of Merlot like an award he'd earned. And Chloe, beautiful, cruel Chloe, twirling in a backless red dress, flashing a ring so big the chandelier reflected off it. Their laughter died the second I stepped inside. "Bad day at work," I managed, forcing a brittle smile. Chloe snorted, loud. "Another one? Wow, sis, this makes what? 4th job in 4 years?" She glanced theatrically at my mother. "Remember when she got fired from that tech startup because she couldn't keep up?" My cheeks flamed. It was a company-wide layoff. My father finally set down his wine. "We need to talk, Serena." No hello, no hug, no welcome home. He led me to the study without asking if I wanted to sit. He never asked when the news was bad. "I've updated the family trust," he said simply. "Your sister is the sole beneficiary now." The words sliced through me like ice. "What?" I whispered. "All of it? You're cutting me out?" "You're 32, he said. "It's time you learned to stand on your own." My mother looked anywhere but at me. I felt something inside me fold. "So this is punishment," I said, "for losing my job?" "This isn't punishment," he replied, cold as the winter air outside. "It's responsibility." Chloe's phone turned toward us. She was filming. "This is gold," she whispered. "Say something, Rena. My followers love drama." "Stop," I snapped. "Just stop." But it was already too late. My father nodded to the house manager. 20 minutes. Pack what you need." The world tilted. "Dad," I said, voice breaking. "It's Christmas Eve." He didn't even flinch. "We all make choices." 20 minutes later, the same man who taught me to ride a bike was opening the door to throw me out into 20-degree weather with a single suitcase and a coat that was barely warm enough to survive a short walk, let alone a night. When the door closed behind me, soft, final, expensive, I heard the alarm beep, armed. I was no longer a daughter. I was a trespasser. I wandered through the quiet streets of our gated neighborhood, dragging my suitcase across perfect sidewalks that had never belonged to me, past houses filled with people who mattered more than I ever would to the people who raised me. The cold cut deeper each block. My fingers stiffened, my eyes blurred. By the time I reached the small public park near Trinity Church, I could barely feel my toes. The bench beneath the street lamp was dusted with snow, as if someone had shaken powdered sugar across it. I sat, finally let the weight collapse me forward, finally let the tears spill, hot at first, then freezing on my cheeks. I cried for every birthday Chloe overshadowed, for every achievement dismissed as not enough, for every time I'd begged silently for my parents to see me. They never had, and maybe they never would. The wind bit harder. I curled in on myself, shivering uncontrollably. The boots I wore were warm, but the cold sank through everything, my coat, my bones, my hope. Then I heard it, a soft scraping, feet dragging. I looked up. She emerged from the fog like a forgotten ghost, barefoot, trembling, silver hair whipping in the wind. Her feet were mottled with purple and blue. Her breath came out in ragged gasps. "Ma'am," she whispered, her voice cracking, "do you know if the shelters still have room? I've been walking for hours." I stared at her ruined feet, at her thin, shaking arms, at the way she tried to stand straighter, as if dignity alone could keep her warm. Something inside me cracked open. I didn't think, didn't question, didn't weigh consequences. I stood, knelt before her, and untied my boots, my last protection against the cold, and slid them onto her frozen feet. She gasped softly, tears gathering in the corners of her pale blue eyes. Her hands covered mine, thin and trembling. "What's your name?" she whispered. "Serena," I said, voice breaking. She repeated it like a blessing. "Thank you, Serena." Then she stood, steadier now, and walked away into the fog. I never expected to see her again. But 2 hours later, surrounded by 30 gleaming black Porsches lined in perfect synchronicity, I saw her step out. No longer barefoot, no longer trembling, no longer fragile, wrapped in power, in wealth, in certainty. She looked at me the way no one ever had, like she already knew who I was. And the words she spoke, just one sentence, would unravel everything I thought I understood about fate, family, and the price of kindness. Before we continue, tell me, have you ever been pushed out, underestimated, or replaced by the very people who should have protected you? Share your story below. Hit like if Serena's journey is resonating with you so far, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters of this long, emotional revenge story. Your voice matters here. I found myself waking before the alarm, long before dawn touched the windows of the guest suite. For a moment I didn't know where I was. The sheets were warm, impossibly soft, nothing like the motel blanket I'd shivered under just the night before. Then the quiet settled in, a different kind of quiet. Thick, insulated, belonging to a house too large to notice a single woman breathing inside it. Rowan Estate, safety, or something that resembled it. The thought alone made my stomach tighten. I pushed back the comforter and sat up slowly, startled by how rested I felt after days of exhaustion. The faint scent of cedar drifted from somewhere, and a low hum, maybe central heating, made the air warm even though frost coated the glass. My suitcase sat neatly beside the wardrobe where someone must have placed it after I fell asleep. I'd been too tired to think, too overwhelmed to process that I was inside the home of the same woman I had given my boots to only hours earlier. And then I heard it. Voices just outside the door, hushed but urgent. One male, one female. "Did she see the report?" the man whispered. "Not yet," the woman replied. "Maeve wants to introduce things slowly." A pause, a sigh. "We don't know if she's the right one." My breath caught. Footsteps moved farther down the hall until silence crept back in. I stood there, hands trembling at my sides. The right one for what? Why was anyone discussing reports involving me? I swallowed hard and pushed the question down for later. Fear could wait. Survival couldn't. By the time I reached the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. My cheeks were still drained from the cold. My hair was matted and wild. My eyes, swollen from crying under a street lamp, looked older than my 32 years. I let the water run over my hands, warm enough to sting my fingertips awake, then splashed it on my face until I felt real again. Present. A person, not a ghost, wandering someone else's mansion. A soft knock broke the stillness. "Miss Alden?" a calm voice called. "Breakfast is being served. Mrs. Rowan would like to see you." I opened the door to find an elderly man in a charcoal vest and white gloves, posture straight as a soldier. His name tag, Clarence. "I can show you the way if you'd like," he said with a gentle smile. I nodded, following him into a wide hallway lined with paintings, oil portraits of people I didn't know, landscapes with foggy lakes and mountains that seemed impossibly tall. Everything felt curated to reflect a life lived with intention, not excess. "This home was built in 1931, Clarence said, noticing my gaze roam across the frames. "Mrs. Rowan has worked hard to preserve its history." I wanted to ask the questions already spinning in my head. Why had she brought me here? What did she want from me? But my throat refused to cooperate. I simply walked, listening to the click of Clarence's polished shoes, echo off marble floors. When we reached the breakfast solarium, sunlight pooled across the table set for two. And there she was, Maeve Rowan, elegant in a cream turtleneck and tailored trousers, hair pulled back in a low knot. No trace of the trembling barefoot woman I'd wrapped in my coat. She looked warm, powerful, composed. "Good morning, Serena," she said with a softness that still managed to command the entire room. "Please, sit." I lowered myself into the chair across from her, trying to ignore how out of place I felt among the porcelain, china, and silver cutlery. "Did you sleep?" she asked. "Yes," I said honestly. "Better than I expected." She smiled faintly. "People often sleep well in this house. Something about knowing they're safe." Safe. That word made my chest tighten. I didn't know how to accept it, not after being thrown out of my parents' house like I was nothing. Maeve folded her hands, eyes studying me in a way that wasn't intrusive but strangely grounding. "I'd like to know who you are, Serena. Not what your family decided about you. Not what the world thinks. Just you." I hesitated, fingers knotted together under the table. "I'm not sure I even know who that is anymore." "Then start with what you do know." I exhaled slowly. "I worked in marketing. 6 years. I tried really hard to prove myself, but the layoffs kept coming. My parents think I should have been more successful by now. They've always thought that." "And how does that make you feel?" she asked, pouring tea into delicate cups. How did it make me feel? Like swallowing broken glass. Like I'd been running uphill for years, only to be told the finish line had moved again. It makes me feel like everything I accomplish is never enough, I admitted. Like I'm always one step behind my sister. Like there's something wrong with me I can't fix. Maeve looked at me with a sympathy that reached deeper than pity. Sometimes families confuse love with expectation, and expectation with control. Her words sank in, warm and painful at the same time. After breakfast, she rose gracefully. "There's something I'd like you to see." Clarence guided us to the library, a cavernous room lined with books that climbed 2 stories high, reached only by golden rolling ladders. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, painting the floor in soft blues and greens. Maeve walked toward a glass display case at the center of the room. Inside was a leather-bound folder. "This," she said, "is the beginning of your evaluation." "My evaluation?" My voice cracked slightly. She nodded. "If you choose to stay, I will offer you a 6-month apprenticeship within my foundation." I blinked. "Why me? You don't even know me." "I know what I saw," she said simply. "A woman with nothing left, who still chose kindness over fear. Kindness without an audience. That's rare." My cheeks warmed. I didn't know how to respond, so I stayed quiet. "This program is rigorous," she continued. "Leadership training, project management, financial ethics, community site work. You will be challenged, tested, sometimes pushed to limits you didn't know existed." "Are you sure I'm qualified?" "No," she said, smiling softly. "And that's the point. Potential often hides in people who think they lack it." For a moment I felt something flicker inside me. Hope, maybe, or the faintest belief that I wasn't a complete disappointment. Maeve handed me the leather folder. It felt heavy, a weight far beyond paper. "We'll begin tomorrow," she said, turning toward the large window overlooking the lake. "Today, Clarence will show you around the estate. Consider it your first assignment." Clarence nodded and motioned for me to follow him into another corridor. This part of the house was quieter, with industrial carpeting instead of marble. Everything smelled faintly of dust and cedar. "This is the archive wing," he explained, stopping before a steel door secured with a biometric lock. "The Foundation stores historical records here, legal documents, project history, board communications. Strictly restricted." But something on the door caught my eye. Engraved plates listing authorized personnel. Maeve Rowan, Jordan Hale, and then one more name, Harold D. Alden. My pulse spiked. My father? How could he have had access to a place like this? And why? Clarence continued walking, unaware that my thoughts had splintered in a dozen directions. I forced my feet to follow, but my mind stayed behind with that silver plaque reflecting my father's name like a ghost. We passed through a hallway of framed photographs, past charity events, construction sites, smiling families holding keys to new homes. The kind of work that genuinely changed lives. Work I had never been trusted with. Work my family had never cared about. Clarence gestured toward a smaller building outside, a path of brick leading through winter-barren rose gardens. "This is where staff training takes place." Inside, the atmosphere shifted again, less formal, more modern. A cluster of employees had gathered, speaking hurriedly over files spread across a table. "These are the strategy analysts," Clarence explained cautiously. "They're working through a disagreement on funding allocations." A brunette woman looked up. "Clarence, thank God, we need another opinion." Before he could protest, she locked eyes with me. "Or maybe she can help." "Oh, no, I'm not," I started, but she pushed a file into my hands. "Mason thinks we should fast-track the shelter funding," she said. "I think there's risk of misuse. What do you see?" I scanned the documents, heart pounding, numbers blurred together. I didn't know these people. I didn't know their systems. But I did know one thing. Rushing decisions was dangerous. "Why is the timeline so urgent?" I asked. Mason crossed his arms. Winter storm approaching. They'll need resources. And what about oversight? I countered gently. Are you comfortable releasing funds without reviewing vendor history? He hesitated. The brunette smirked. Exactly what I said. Clarence cleared his throat. Mrs. Rowan wanted her to observe, not intervene. But the room had shifted. People were watching me differently, as if surprised someone like me, someone barely holding her life together, could speak with logic. I handed the files back. I just think both urgency and accountability matter. That's all. As we left, I could still feel their eyes following me. Outside, cold wind swept across my face. I pulled my coat tighter, my new coat, not the one I'd given away, and inhaled slowly. You handled that well, Clarence said. I wasn't trying to. My mouth just moved. That's usually when truth slips out. When we re-entered the estate, a chill ran down my spine. Someone had left an envelope on the table outside my bedroom door. Plain, unmarked. I picked it up, heart pounding, and slipped a finger beneath the flap. Inside was a single photo. Me, maybe 8 years old, standing in front of a construction site sign that read, Alden Heritage Homes. Written across the bottom, in slanted handwriting, you were never supposed to know. My breath froze. The hallway seemed to tilt. I whipped around, but no one stood there. Just shadows stretching across the walls. Somewhere deeper in the house, a door clicked shut. And for the first time since arriving at Rowan Estate, I realized I wasn't just being helped. I was being watched. The first thing I noticed when I woke was the silence. Not the uneasy silence of a motel at dawn, or the suffocating silence of my parents' house. This was different. This silence felt intentional, curated, the kind that settles over a place where people expect to be obeyed, the kind that hides secrets in its walls. For a moment I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to forget the envelope from last night. The photo. The message. My 8-year-old self standing in front of Alden Heritage Homes like some ghost trapped in a truth I wasn't meant to uncover. I pushed the memory down, reminding myself today was my first real day inside Rowan Estate, and I would need all the composure I could muster. The scent of brewed coffee drifted under the door. I pulled myself out of bed, dressed quickly, and tried to smooth the nerves fluttering beneath my ribcage. This place wasn't home, not yet, not ever, but it was the first place in a long time where I wasn't immediately punished for existing. A knock sounded. "Miss Alden," Clarence called. "Mrs. Rowan is waiting in the east breakfast room." I opened the door and followed him into the hallway, trying not to stare at every oil portrait and carved archway we passed. The house had a way of making a person aware of their own smallness. Every echo of our footsteps reminded me I was a guest, not a resident. Maeve was already seated when I arrived, sunlight from the tall windows laying delicate stripes across the tablecloth. She looked peaceful, reading something printed on thick cream paper. "Good morning, Serena," she said, lifting her gaze with a smile. "Did you rest?" "After some effort," I replied honestly. Her expression softened. "This house can be overwhelming when you're not used to it." Overwhelming wasn't the word I would have chosen, but I didn't correct her. She gestured toward the chair across from her, and I sat, finding comfort in the warmth from a cup of jasmine tea someone had placed beside my plate. "We'll begin your orientation today," she said. "But first, tell me how you're feeling." Feeling. That word again. People like my parents never cared how I felt. They only cared how I reflected on them. "I'm processing," I said, "trying to understand why I'm here." Maeve regarded me for a long breath. "You're here because I saw truth in you, the kind of truth that appears only when no one is watching." I shifted uncomfortably, unsure what to do with the praise. She took a sip of tea. "After breakfast, I'd like to walk you through what your next 6 months could look like." "Could?" I echoed. "Yes, nothing here is forced. This is an invitation, not a command." That alone made my throat tighten. How different it felt to be offered a choice. When we finished, she led me through a corridor lined with stained glass windows and into the estate's grand library. My breath caught for a second. Books stretched upward across 2 floors, ladders on rails, sunlight making soft patterns of ruby and sapphire across the hardwood. "This," she said, "is where most apprentices spend their first week, learning history, understanding context, knowing what came before them." I walked slowly past the tables and shelves, fingertips grazing the polished wood. "What am I apprenticing for?" I finally asked. Maeve smiled faintly. "Leadership within the Rowan Foundation, and perhaps something more, if you're willing to earn it." The idea of leadership, a word I'd never associated with myself, felt too large to hold. Before I could respond, someone entered from the other side of the room. Jordan Hale. I recognized her immediately from the night before, a tall, sharp-featured woman with a posture so perfect it bordered on intimidating. She wore a charcoal blazer and held a digital tablet like it was a weapon. "Jordan will guide you through your initial steps," Maeve said. "Try not to be frightened. She appears severe, but only when awake." Jordan did not smile at the joke. Instead, she studied me with cool assessment, as though she were scanning for weaknesses. "Good to meet you, Miss Alden," she said. "Please sign these." She handed me a stack of documents, confidentiality agreements, residency rules, privacy clauses, and something labeled ethical compliance for apprenticeship candidates. The stack felt heavier than it looked. "What exactly am I agreeing to?" I asked. Jordan's eyebrow lifted. "To behave with integrity and judgment. Characteristics, Mrs. Rowan believes you possess." It was subtle, but I heard the doubt beneath her tone. I signed my name at the bottom of every page. My signature looked smaller than usual. "Follow me," Jordan said, turning pivot sharp on her heel. We passed through a quieter wing of the house, where modern glass panels replaced older architecture. The air smelled faintly of stone and winter berries. Jordan tapped her badge against a security panel, and a door unlocked with a soft hiss. "This," she said, stepping aside, "is the strategy room." Inside, a long table stretched across the center, walls covered in digital screens displaying charts, maps, and timelines. 2 analysts were already mid-argument. "I'm telling you," one said, jabbing at a spreadsheet, "if we allocate more to the Northern District now, we'll risk shortfall by spring." The other shook her head. "And if we delay emergency funding, the shelters won't make it through the storm. We can't gamble on hypothetical deficits." Their voices snapped through the room like breaking glass. Jordan placed a hand on my shoulder and gently nudged me forward. "Observe." I stood quietly, absorbing the tension. The disagreement reminded me of board meetings I'd once pitched in, though those had been about ad budgets and brand campaigns, not about lives. One of the analysts finally noticed me. "Oh, are you the new candidate?" "I guess so," I said. "Then weigh in," she said, pointing toward the screen. "What's the priority, risk mitigation or immediate relief?" The sudden pressure made every nerve light up. I swallowed, stepping closer to the data. "Why is the Northern District overspending?" I asked. "Vendor instability," the first analyst said. "And the shelters?" "Haven't received winter aid yet." I exhaled slowly. Then maybe the question isn't which crisis to prioritize, but how to prevent tomorrow's crisis while responding to today's. Both analysts blinked. Jordan's eyes snapped toward me, surprised but not displeased. "Go on," said the second analyst. "If you release half the emergency funds now," I said slowly, "and freeze the unstable vendor accounts for a 72-hour review, the shelters stay open while you reallocate. No one collapses, no one gambles. Both sides breathe." Silence rushed into the room like wind. "That actually works," the first analyst murmured. Jordan's face remained unreadable. Maeve, I thought, would have smiled. We left the strategy room with Jordan walking slightly slower than before, like she was re-evaluating me. "Not bad," she said finally. "But insight is meaningless without consistency. Was that a compliment? From Jordan, maybe. She led me down another hallway to a staircase descending into the lower level of the estate. The air grew cooler, the lights dimmer. This area houses restricted archives, she said. Only 3 of us have access. She lifted her badge again, unlocking another steel door. Beneath the fluorescent lights, row after row of metal cabinets lined the space, labeled by year. What's down here? I asked. History, she replied. Failures, successes, legal documents, mistakes we cannot afford to repeat. Mistakes. The word pulsed in my head. My father's name on the door from yesterday, the photo from the envelope. Jordan led me past a series of locked storage units before stopping in front of a sealed glass room. Through the glass, I saw a brass plaque on the far wall. Legacy Room. Authorized personnel only. And there it was again, gleaming faintly under the industrial lighting. Harold D. Alden. My breath hitched. The letters seemed to glow, mocking me, daring me to ask the question clawing at my chest. Why did my father have authorized access at the Rowan Foundation? Jordan must have noticed my posture stiffen. Something wrong? She asked. I forced my eyes away. No, just taking it all in. She studied me too long, as if she sensed a crack she couldn't yet identify. After the archives, Clarence met me outside to escort me to the training center on the east side of the property. Today, he said, would include exercises in situational reasoning, whatever that meant. Inside the modest building, I found a small cafeteria where staff were having lunch. The air smelled of roasted vegetables and rosemary bread. Several employees looked up as I entered, curiosity thick in the air. A man at the corner table spoke first. You must be the new apprentice candidate. I guess word travels fast, I said awkwardly. He chuckled. Mrs. Rowan doesn't bring just anyone in here. You've already caused quite a stir. A stir? I didn't know whether to feel proud or terrified. Clarence motioned toward a table. Sit, eat. You'll need your strength. I sat with a plate of soup and bread while 2 employees continued a tense conversation nearby. I'm telling you the data projection won't hold, a woman insisted. If we approve grants before verifying the new census numbers, we risk overspending by summer. It's winter now, her colleague snapped. People need heat. They need food. We can fix the projections later. The projections determine survival. The survival is happening right now. The argument escalated until both turned to me in exasperation. What would you do? The man demanded. Since apparently you're the prodigy Mrs. Rowan plucked from the cold. Heat rushed to my cheeks. I'm not. But you have an opinion, the woman cut in gently. Don't you? I hesitated, looking between them. Something inside me, something quiet but solid, began to rise. I think, I said slowly, you're both trying to protect people, just in different ways. Maybe the solution is to pause discretionary spending until the census is verified, but release emergency aid through temporary channels. That way no one freezes while we wait for accurate data. A long silence. Then both employees nodded. That would actually work, the man admitted. The woman smiled. Looks like you'll fit in here just fine. When Clarence and I stepped outside, the cold air bit my cheeks again, but something inside me felt warmer, steadier. You have a natural gift, Clarence said. I laughed incredulously. For making guesses? For seeing what others miss, he corrected. Mrs. Rowan values that above all. Back in the main house, the hallway leading to my room was dim, the afternoon light already fading. I reached my door and froze. Another envelope lay on the floor. Plain, unmarked, like the first one. My heart thudded painfully as I picked it up and opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single note, written in the same slanted handwriting as before. This isn't the last secret, Serena. I stared at the words until they blurred. Someone in this house knew more about my past than I did. Someone had been watching me from the moment I arrived, and whoever they weren't finished. I barely slept. Every time my eyes closed, the handwriting from last night's note reappeared behind my eyelids. Sharp, slanted, knowing. By the time dawn seeped through the curtains, I was already sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, hands pressed against my mouth. The house was quiet, but not in a comforting way. More like it was holding its breath. When Clarence knocked at 6, I almost jumped. "Miss Alden," he said gently, "it's time to get ready. Mrs. Rowan would like to begin your assessment at 7. Assessment. The word felt heavier this morning, as if the note had added a second meaning. I dressed quickly, tying my hair back, trying to look like someone prepared to face the day instead of someone unraveling from the inside. Breakfast was simple: oatmeal with berries, tea, and the soft clink of silverware, but I barely tasted any of it. Across the table, Maeve studied me in quiet contemplation. She didn't ask if I'd slept. She didn't need to. "Today we begin," she said instead. "Only one thing is required of you: honesty with yourself." I nodded, though my stomach tightened. Honesty was something I'd never been rewarded for. In my family, honesty only created trouble. When breakfast ended, Jordan appeared at the doorway, her expression clipped and precise. She was dressed impeccably in navy, tablet tucked under her arm as if it were a shield. "Follow me," she said. Her heels clicked in even, controlled beats as she guided me through the estate. I tried to match her pace, though nerves made my steps less steady. We passed through a long corridor and stopped before a room I hadn't seen before, a long rectangular office with glass walls and a heavy conference table in the center. Inside, 2 groups of foundation staff were already seated, their faces tight with tension. "This is the moral split test," Jordan said. "Your first evaluation." "I'm sorry." "My what?" But she had already stepped aside. Maeve, who'd entered silently, motioned for me to take a seat between the 2 groups. "Listen first," she instructed. "Speak only when you understand." The air in the room was thick enough to swallow. A woman on my left leaned forward. "We need immediate approval to release funds to the Harbor Light Shelter. They've exceeded capacity. If the storm hits tonight, dozens of women will be outside." A man across from her shook his head sharply. "We can't authorize funds until financial discrepancies are cleared. They overspent last quarter. Releasing aid now could jeopardize the winter allocations." "Women will freeze," she countered. "And we'll be liable," he shot back. Their eyes snapped to me. I wanted to shrink back. I was no expert. I'd barely been allowed to make decisions for myself, let alone decisions affecting people I'd never met. But the expectation in the room pushed against me, demanding something real. "What evidence do you have of misuse?" I asked the man. He slid a paper forward. "Vendor inconsistencies, late reports, an overpayment." "And what do you need to keep people warm tonight?" I asked the woman. 20,000 in emergency aid," she said immediately. 20,000, enough to collapse a shelter, or save one. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the fear pass through me. My voice, when it came, was steadier than I felt. "Release emergency aid," I said, "but only as a temporary allocation. Freeze all non-essential spending until the discrepancies are investigated." Silence. Then, one by one, heads nodded. Maeve's eyes glimmered with something like approval. Jordan, however, remained expressionless. "The first test is complete," Jordan said. "Next." I didn't have time to let my pulse settle. Clarence appeared in the doorway, motioning me forward. "Humility rotation," he said as we walked down a back staircase leading toward the estate's kitchen. "The what?" He smiled kindly. "Leadership is built on service. Everyone starts with 2 hours here." The kitchen was alive with motion, pots steaming, knives chopping, ovens humming. A man in a white apron placed a mixing bowl in front of me before I could protest. "Whip these," he said, "and don't splatter. Last apprentice did." "I'm not an apprentice," I muttered. "Yet," he replied. But there was something grounding about working with my hands, whipping eggs, folding dough, lining plates. No pressure to impress, no family watching for missteps. Just a task, a beginning. One of the cooks, an older woman with soft eyes, paused beside me. "You're the one who was out in that storm, aren't you?" I stiffened. Yes." She nodded as if she already knew the answer. "The world can be cruel, sweetheart. But the cruelest families are the ones who swear they love you while they're breaking you." My throat tightened. "How did you—" "I've lived long enough to recognize that look," she said quietly. "The look of someone who's been told she's too much and not enough at the same time." I swallowed hard. "I don't know why I'm even here." "Because someone finally saw you," she said, "not who you were taught to be." I had to blink back tears. Before I could answer, Jordan appeared in the doorway. "Time's up," she said. "Mrs. Rowan wants her next evaluation completed." The third test took place in a small conference room. A man sat at the table, fidgeting with a stapler. He wore a worn jacket and kept clearing his throat. "This is a live simulation," Jordan said quietly. "Treat it as such." The man looked up. "You the director?" "No," I said, "but I'm here to help." I submitted my application for funding," he began. "But there are questions about my paperwork. They think I changed some numbers, but I swear I didn't mean anything wrong." I studied his face, the trembling hands, the fear he tried to hide. My father had once looked like that too, but for very different reasons. "Why did the numbers change?" I asked gently. "I copied from an older form. I thought it was the same version." His voice cracked. "Look, we house veterans, real men with nowhere else to go. If we lose our funding—" I interrupted him softly. "You're overwhelmed, and you're scared it's already too late." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I'm not here to accuse you," I said. "I'm here to fix the problem. Let's review the forms together. If there's an error, we'll correct it. But the integrity of the funding has to be protected, for you and for the people counting on you." The man's shoulders dropped in relief. Jordan's face shifted, just barely, but I saw the flicker, a glimmer of something not quite approval but not disapproval either. The moment I stepped back into the hallway, however, that softened expression vanished. "We need to talk," she said curtly. "Now." She led me into a small office overlooking the courtyard. Papers covered the desk, charts, numbers, photos of shelter openings. But Jordan wasn't looking at any of them. She was looking at me. "You impressed them today," she said, her voice clipped. "But that doesn't mean you belong here." The words stung, though I tried not to show it. "I'm not afraid of hard work," I said. "That's not the issue." Her jaw tightened. "People have come through here before with good intentions. Some failed. Some betrayed this foundation." "What are you saying?" "That we cannot afford another mistake." Her voice dropped. "Mrs. Rowan believes in you. I don't. Not yet." I inhaled sharply. "Then what do I need to do?" Her answer came with ice. "Survive the truth." Before I could ask what she meant, she motioned me away, already burying herself in paperwork again. I wandered the hallway, unsettled. Questions churned inside me, about the evaluation, about why I was being tested so intensely, about what truth Jordan believed would break me. As I approached the archive corridor, a draft of cold air brushed past my ankles. The door to the legacy room, where my father's name had been engraved, was slightly ajar. My pulse quickened. I stepped closer, just enough to peer inside. Rows of boxes sat neatly on metal shelves. Some were labeled with project names, others with years. Then I saw one box near the back. Alden Investigation, Pending. My breath hitched. Slowly, carefully, I reached for the door. A hand appeared suddenly, slamming it shut. I jumped back, heart racing. Jordan stood there, face carved from stone. "This room is off limits," she said sharply. "You do not have clearance." I wasn't going in, You just what?" she cut in. "Wandering into confidential areas? That's how trust breaks, Miss Alden, quickly." I stepped back, ashamed and angry and confused all at once. Jordan locked the door with her badge, then turned toward me, her voice low enough to sting. You're here to be evaluated, not to uncover ghosts." She strode away before I could respond. By the time I returned to my room, shadows were pooling along the baseboards. The estate, once warm, seemed colder. Too many locked rooms, too many whispered conversations. Something lay on the floor near my door. Another envelope. My stomach dropped. Hands shaking, I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a single page, no photo this time, just one sentence. "He didn't tell you the truth about that night." My heart pounded so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. Which night? What truth? And who inside this mansion wanted me to know? The hallway around me stayed silent. Too silent. As if someone had already slipped back into the shadows, watching to see what I'd do next. The note lay on my lap long after the sun had risen, its single sentence carving a hollow into my chest. "He didn't tell you the truth about that night." I kept reading it, hoping the meaning would shift, soften, reveal itself. It never did. Instead, it felt heavier with every breath, as though someone had slipped a stone behind my ribs. By the time I left my room, the estate was already awake. Staff moved quietly along the hallway, carts of linens rolling, murmured conversations drifting from distant corners. Nothing looked unusual, and yet everything felt altered. Like the house itself knew something I didn't. I found Maeve in the small east study, standing beside a window where pale morning light filtered through sheer curtains. She was turning pages in a leather-bound folder, her face unreadable. "Serena," she said, not looking up. "Come in." My hands tightened around the note, the edges bending. She noticed immediately when she finally lifted her gaze. "What's troubling you?" I hesitated. Trust was fragile here, not given freely, but required for survival. I stepped closer and placed the note on the desk between us. "I found this last night," I said. "Someone left it outside my room." Maeve picked up the paper delicately, reading the words once, twice. Something flickered across her expression, brief, but unmistakable. Recognition. "I don't know what this means," I whispered. "But I need to." She folded the note and set it aside. "There are truths," she said softly, "that arrive when a person is finally strong enough to survive them." I swallowed. And am I strong enough now? That is what today will reveal. With a motion of her hand, she guided me toward the private elevator that led to the third floor, the one she rarely used. The ride was silent but weighted with anticipation. When the doors opened, we stepped into a narrow hallway bathed in warm lamplight. At the end stood a small door painted in forest green. Maeve handed me a key, a simple brass key worn at the edges. "Your past intersects with the Foundation's history more than you know," she said. "Open the room, begin there." My pulse pounded as I slid the key into the lock. The door opened with a soft click. Inside was a compact archive room, nothing like the steel vaults downstairs. This one felt personal, almost intimate. Wooden shelves lined the walls. Boxes labeled by year sat stacked neatly, most dated between 1997 and 2005. Maeve stayed in the doorway, letting me step forward alone. I reached for the first box marked Alden Heritage Homes. Grant Cycle Review. The familiar name sent a tremor down my spine. My father's company. The company that had been unraveling long before anyone admitted it. Inside were project assessments, invoices, and a printed email exchange between the Foundation and Alden Heritage. I scanned the pages, heart thudding. Vendor discrepancies, delays, missing receipts, and then the phrase that froze me. Funds discrepancy under investigation. My father's signature was on every page. "He told the Foundation everything was accounted for," I said quietly, more to myself than to Maeve. "Your father wanted success," she replied, "but not accountability." I set the papers aside and reached for the next folder. The label read, Site Audit, Fall 2004. My hands trembled as I opened it. A photo slipped out, grainy but unmistakable. Me, a small version of me, standing in front of a half-built housing unit with a clipboard in my hand. My hair in two uneven pigtails. wearing a too large construction vest like it was a costume. A note in the corner read, "Child present during audit. Unusual circumstance." My breath caught. "I don't remember this." "You were 8, Maeve said. "Memories blur, or sometimes they're buried." "Why was I there?" I whispered. "Keep reading." The audit summary mentioned incomplete documentation, missing receipts, and unresolved concerns regarding record alteration. Attached was a brief narrative from the auditor, a woman named Laura Keating. I scanned the lines, each one tightening something inside my throat. Meeting terminated by Mr. Alden, raised voice, child present, mother distressed. Potential risk of exposure, altered ledgers, risk of exposure. I pressed my fingers to my temples. A faint memory flashed, shouting, my mother pulling me away from a doorway, my father's voice thundering, "She doesn't understand anything she saw." And then darkness. My mind refusing to show me the rest. "What did he alter?" I whispered. "Funding documents," Maeve said softly. "Numbers, signatures, anything that made the project look cleaner than it was. He committed fraud." "Yes." "And he blamed me?" Maeve's silence was the answer. I stared at the walls of the archive room, feeling something inside me shatter, not violently but like thin glass cracking slowly. I reached for the next document, a letter from my mother. Unlike the version I'd seen downstairs, this one wasn't incomplete. It wasn't torn. "Dear Mrs. Rowan, I am afraid for my daughters. Harold is making choices I cannot stop. Please understand that if you ever question him, I will not be able to protect the truth. Or myself." My eyes blurred. I clutched the letter like it was the last piece of her I had. "She knew," I murmured. "She knew what he was doing." "She tried to intervene," Maeve said, "more than once." "Then why didn't she say anything?" "Fear," she replied simply. "Fear of losing you. Fear of losing Chloe. Fear of losing the roof above her head." I closed my eyes, letting the truth settle over me like ash. When I opened them again, Maeve was watching me with a softness that made my chest ache. "There is more," she said gently. She pointed toward a slim folder at the bottom of the shelf. "Alden Heritage Homes, Internal Notes, 2004. Inside I found handwritten notes from my father. The handwriting was familiar. Sharp, heavy strokes, the pen pressed too hard into the page. One line was circled. "Keep Serena away. She talks too much." My knees weakened. I had to grip the edge of the shelf to steady myself. "He used me," I whispered. "He used me to hide what he was doing." "He feared that the wrong person would ask you the right question," Maeve said. "Children often notice things adults overlook." Everything inside me constricted, memories snapping into focus with cruel clarity. The night he yelled at me for entering his office, the day he slammed a drawer shut when I asked about the papers inside, the way he always said, "You're too curious for your own good." I breathed through the tightness, but the room felt smaller now, like the truth had filled every available space. "Why are you showing me this?" I managed. "Because you asked," Maeve said, "and because healing requires truth, not illusion." I pressed a shaking hand to my face. "I don't know how to feel." "You're not supposed to know," she said gently. "Feelings come after understanding, and you're still understanding." She stepped aside, giving me space to leave the archive room. My legs felt unsteady, but I forced them to move. Every step felt like walking through the aftermath of a storm I didn't know I'd survived. When we reached the staircase, I turned to her. "What happens now?" "That depends on you," she said. "You can choose to go further, or you can choose to stop. And what would you choose?" She gave me a small, sad smile. "The truth never becomes less true by avoiding it." I nodded, unable to trust my own voice. Hours later, when I finally returned to my room, I barely had time to close the door before I saw her, Chloe, sitting in the armchair beside my bed. Her mascara was smeared, hair tangled, clothes wrinkled as though she'd been crying for hours. She rose slowly when she saw me. "Serena," she whispered, We need to talk." My breath halted. "I wasn't the only one Dad was afraid of," she said, voice cracking. Just like that, the floor beneath me seemed to tilt again. Another secret. Another night. Another truth waiting to unravel everything. Chloe stood when I entered, her whole body trembling as though she'd been holding herself together only by force of will. The last time I'd seen her, she'd been smirking behind her phone while I dragged a suitcase across frozen marble. Now she looked small, stripped of everything sharp. Her eyes were swollen, her cheeks blotchy, her posture unsure, like she wasn't certain I wouldn't tell her to get out. "How did you even get in here?" I asked quietly. She rubbed her hands together, gaze flicking toward the door as if expecting someone to chase her. I told security I was your sister. They called Jordan. She let me through." Her voice cracked. I think she already knew I was coming. That didn't ease the tension in my chest. If anything, it made my pulse climb higher. Jordan let her in? Why? Chloe stepped closer, but not close enough to reach me. "Serena, things are worse than you think." I crossed my arms to steady myself. "Worse in what way?" She swallowed hard, mascara gathering beneath her lashes. "Dad's being investigated by the feds, not just for the old stuff, for new things, big things. People are talking, lawyers, reporters." Tears welled. "And he's blaming you." My breath hitched. "Me?" "He says someone inside the foundation reopened the old investigation," she said shakily. "He thinks it was you. He thinks you want revenge." "I didn't reopen anything," I said, hearing the disbelief in my own voice. "I'm just trying to understand what happened." Chloe shook her head, taking another hesitant step. "Serena, he's falling apart, and Mom can barely sleep. I've never seen her like this." Her voice cracked, and suddenly she was crying in earnest. My instinct was to reach out, but years of her taunts pressed down like a warning. I stayed where I was. "What do you want from me?" I asked softly. Chloe wiped at her cheeks, leaving streaks on her skin. "I want to explain. About that night, and about what Dad told people, about you." Something cold settled at the base of my spine. "What did he tell them?" "That you were unstable," she whispered. "That you made up stories to get attention. That you caused trouble at the construction sites as a kid." She covered her mouth with her hand. "He even told Mom once that you stole documents from his office. That you," her voice broke, "that you ruined everything." A hollow opened inside me. I was 8. I couldn't ruin anything. "I know," she whispered, "but he needed someone to blame." I stared at her, the truth cutting deeper than any insult she'd ever thrown at me. My father hadn't just failed me. He'd made me the scapegoat for his crimes. The child he was supposed to protect became the shield he hid behind. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Chloe's shoulders sagged. "Because I'm scared. Everything is falling apart. And Dad keeps saying he can fix it if I get you to help." The air shifted. There it was. The motive behind her tears. "You want me to intervene," I said. She nodded weakly. "Please, Serena, talk to Mrs. Rowan. Ask her to stop the investigation. Or help Dad pay the penalties. You're in her inner circle now. She listens to you." A sharp ache bloomed in my chest. "Chloe, I can't undo federal law." "But you can talk to her," she insisted. "You can make her see that Dad isn't a bad person. He just made mistakes." "Big mistakes," I said quietly. "Deliberate mistakes." Chloe flinched. "You don't understand how much pressure he was under." "Pressure doesn't excuse fraud," I replied. Her eyes widened and her tone hardened. "Are you enjoying this? Watching us fall apart? Is this payback for Christmas Eve?" My jaw clenched. "This isn't about payback. It's about the truth." She threw up her hands. "Truth doesn't matter when your family is losing everything." I took a step back, not from fear but from clarity. She wasn't here for healing. She was here because she was drowning, and she wanted to pull me in with her. I forced myself to stay calm. "I'm sorry you're scared, but I won't obstruct justice." Her mouth fell open. "So you're choosing her? This old woman you met one day over your own blood?" "I'm choosing integrity," I said softly. "Something Dad didn't choose." Chloe's face twisted. "You think you're better than us now, just because she took pity on you." "I don't think I'm better," I said, voice steady. "I'm just done being blamed for things that weren't my fault." Something in her expression snapped. Her sadness calcified into something sharp. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You think she's rescuing you? She's using you, just like everyone else, just like Dad said." "That's not true. You don't know what she's capable of." Her voice trembled with something darker than fear. Panic. Desperation. I stepped toward her. "Chloe, who told you anything about my assessment? Or about the investigation?" She froze. A flicker of guilt crossed her face. "Dad," she whispered. "Dad has someone feeding him information." My stomach dropped. "Someone in this house?" "I don't know," she said quickly. "He never told me who, just that he knew things before they happened." A chill crept across my skin. Someone here was giving my father updates. Jordan, Clarence, a staff member, or someone higher. Before I could process it, a voice came from behind us. "That's enough." We both turned. Maeve stood in the doorway, composed but radiating a quiet authority that filled the room with silence. Chloe stiffened. "Mrs. Rowan, I didn't mean to intrude." "But you did," Maeve said calmly, "and not for the reason you claimed." Chloe's eyes darted to me, then to the floor. "You didn't come to apologize," Maeve continued. "You came to manipulate your sister into shielding your father from consequences." Chloe bristled. "You don't know anything about us." "I know emotional coercion when I see it." Maeve stepped further inside. "And I know a young woman who has not once taken responsibility for her own actions." Tears spilled down Chloe's cheeks again. "This isn't fair. I'm trying." "No," Maeve said gently but firmly. "You are pleading, not changing." Chloe's breath hitched, and for a moment she looked like a child lost in a storm. "You think I'm the problem," she whispered. "But Dad did what he did for us." "No," Maeve said softly. "He did it to protect his ego, not his family." Chloe flinched as though struck. Maeve approached her slowly. "I am sorry for what you've gone through, but I will not allow you to drag Serena back into the damage your father created." Chloe looked at me, voice cracking. "Please, don't abandon us." I stepped closer, my own voice breaking. "I'm not abandoning you, Chloe. But I'm not saving anyone who refuses to save themselves." Her lips trembled. "I don't know how." "That's the first true thing you've said," Maeve murmured. For a moment, the room held all three of us. Hurt, fear, truth, and something fragile that might one day become forgiveness. But Chloe wasn't ready. Not yet. Tears streaming, she brushed past me and rushed toward the door. Before she stepped out, she turned back one last time. "You're changing," she said bitterly, "and you're leaving us behind." I swallowed hard. "I'm choosing myself, Chloe, for the first time." She shook her head, wiped her face, and disappeared down the hallway. I exhaled shakily. Maeve reached out, resting a hand lightly on my arm. "Are you all right?" I nodded, though the truth was tangled inside me. She's scared. They all are. "And fear makes people dangerous," Maeve said softly, "especially when they believe lies for too long." My eyes drifted to the window, where winter light washed the garden in pale silver. "Do you think she meant it?" I asked. "When she said Dad has someone inside this house giving him information?" Maeve's expression tightened. "I think it's possible, which means we must be careful." A chill ran down my spine. "Come," Maeve said. "There's more for you to learn today." But as we walked toward the elevator, I couldn't shake the feeling that Chloe's visit hadn't been a reunion. It had been a warning. And whoever was feeding my father information. They were still inside Rowan Estate, watching, waiting, and closer than I ever imagined. The tablet shook in my hands before I even understood what I was looking at. A frozen frame of my own face, me standing at the gates of Rowan Estate, caught mid-blink, mid-breath, mid-nothing, sat beneath a bold, screaming title, "My sister sold her family for money." The video had already passed 300,000 views, and climbing. I stared, unable to move, as the progress bar crept forward. Then Chloe's voice burst through the speakers, trembling, soft, heartbreakingly calculated. "My sister, she left us. She chose money over family, over mom, over dad. She's letting them lose everything while she lives in a mansion." The camera shook slightly, as if she were holding it with trembling hands. "I know she's hurting," Chloe said, sniffling, "but she doesn't care who she destroys anymore." I felt the floor tilt. My breath thinned until the air tasted metallic. Jordan reached out, steadying the tablet in my hands before it slipped. "Watch all of it," she said quietly. Chloe continued, tears tracking down her cheeks as she angled the camera to reveal the outside of the estate where she had stood just an hour before meeting me. "She's changed," Melanie whispered dramatically. "This place got inside her head. They turned her against us." Then the edit cut abruptly, to me walking beside Clarence earlier that morning. She must have filmed it from behind a tree or a parked car. The angle made it look like I was ignoring him, chin high, aloof. "She won't even look at me," Chloe said. "She won't help us keep our home. She wants Dad punished." It cut again. Another stolen clip of me entering the East Wing, framed to look like secrecy, arrogance. "She doesn't care what happens to us," Chloe's voice cracked. "She wants us to fail." The comments poured in faster than the view count. How can she abandon her own parents? Money changes people, ungrateful monster. Hope the truth comes out. My stomach lurched. "She edited everything. She twisted, she scripted it," Jordan said flatly. "The whole thing was recorded before she saw you." I pressed my knuckles to my mouth. "But why?" "Desperation," Jordan replied. "Fear. And a lifetime of believing manipulation is easier than truth." Maeve stepped forward, taking the tablet gently from my hands and locking the screen. "Don't let your sister's panic become your burden," she murmured. "This is about her survival, not your character." But humiliation was rising like heat up my throat. Everyone's going to think I'm a monster. "For a little while," Jordan said bluntly. "The internet reacts before it thinks." "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No," she replied. "It's supposed to make you patient." But patience had never been my strength. Not when it came to my family. Not when every bruise they'd left on me felt fresh again. I moved toward the window, needing air, needing space. Outside, cameras had already gathered at the gates, local reporters, bloggers, teenagers hoping to film whatever meltdown they assumed was coming next. "They're here?" I whispered. "Of course," Jordan said. "Drama attracts crowd. Truth attracts time." I pressed my forehead to the glass. I don't know how to fight something like this. Maeve's reflection appeared beside mine. "You don't fight it," she said softly. "You outlast it." A fresh wave of comments scrolled across the tablet Jordan now held. Poor Chloe. How can a sister be this cruel? Money must have gotten to her head.